is, a little confusing. Evidently, we don't have video on YouTube. Let's see if we can just quickly figure that out. Yeah, I'm not seeing what's going on here. Oh well, we're going to go ahead and I'll upload that later on today. So anyway, I'm going to talk about what it is that is going on here. So first of all, Jesus is talking about to the Sadducees. He's in the temple, and essentially he's being addressed by all of the religious leaders of his day. In the temple is kind of where everybody who is important hangs out. So they are the ones who are responsible for teaching. They're the ones who are responsible for all the religious practices and rituals. They're the ones who are responsible for pretty much everything when it comes to the law in the kingdom of Israel. So right now we have a group called the Sadducees who are coming at Jesus with a really bizarre hypothetical question. Why in the world are they doing this? Well, it's actually for a very specific purpose. So the Sadducees are this aristocratic, long-held caste in Israel of individuals who were the original priests in their society and who believed that the priesthood, meaning those people who are supposed to do the ritual, was passed through generation to generation. And so the people that are talking to Jesus right now are actually descendants of the original priests of the original temple, like 1,000 years ago. So these people consider them to be themselves to be quite important. And not only that, they are also quite wealthy because all the temple work is where all of the overflow of the wealthy goes, because it's supposed to be redistributed to the poor, which of course isn't happening, so that money is just stopping with them. So they consider themselves to be the elite of the elite, the look down your nose aristocrat institution of Israel, and so of their theology and of their faith. So they come to Jesus with a very specific question. And this question sounds really bizarre. If you don't understand the culture, it sounds pretty terrible, actually, right? So I want to explain what that means and why in the world they would even suggest this scenario. So first of all, the Sadducees as a group in the kingdom of Israel, in Israel at this time, they're one of the few people who don't believe that when we die, we are resurrected, meaning brought to life in some other fashion, and live eternally after that. At this point, they believe that basically you just end and that's it. So they're trying to ask an absurd hypothetical question to trap Jesus by saying, look, we are going to give you this hypothetical situation that is going to be obvious that we can't be raised from the dead, because otherwise this crazy scenario is what would happen, and so therefore it can't happen. Of course, Jesus is going to sidestep this because he's focused on the true heart of the message and of their whole religion at this point. So we come to this place where there's this really weird hypothetical situation, right? So there's a brother who has a wife. There's 7 brothers. The first brother has a wife, and he dies before she is able to have kids on behalf of him, as a family, basically. And in this time, in the Jewish law, the person who was responsible for her became the brother's brother. So let's say Adam is married to his wife, Eve, what the heck, and Adam dies, and now he's got to now his wife goes to Steve, his other brother, who is supposed to, by law, give her the ability to reproduce and to have offspring. Now that sounds pretty crazy to us in our modern society, in our modern culture, but I want to take you back 2,000 years ago to a place that's very, very different than our time right now. Back in this day, it was very difficult for a woman to be able to sustain herself economically, and also all of the money of a family. For instance, Adam and we'll say Eve, his wife. Adam, when he dies, all the things that he owns, every part of the family and inheritance, doesn't stick with his wife necessarily. And it does in some fashions, but it can't continue without her getting married to the brothers. And so the brothers, in order to protect the family fortune, but also in order to give Adam's wife some level of pride in society, because this society very much emphasizes child rearing and childbearing for women. And so they're handed to another brother. Now, the Sadducees are using this as a pretty ridiculous hypothetical, right? So they're saying this happens 6 times, and even finally at the 7th brother, he doesn't produce any children for her. She dies, and okay, so when they all are resurrected at the end, whose wife is she going to be? Because she didn't actually have children with any of them. Their intention, of course, is to point to Jesus and say, look, this is why it's absurd that we're resurrected, because this scenario wouldn't work. And of course, Jesus knows exactly what they're doing, and probably is getting a little tired by this point, because he's already been attacked by the Pharisees, already been attacked by the Herodians, who are all about the political party of the king of Herod. He's already been attacked by everybody who's there. Now it's the last group. And so I would imagine he's getting a little tired of it. I know I certainly would be, but what does he do? He points out something that is pretty, I think, a little fun, in the fact that he's like, if we're going to talk about resurrection, why on earth would you think that resurrection would happen to put us back to exactly the same situation that we're in right now? Not only do you misunderstand the whole point of the scriptures, but you misunderstand a lot of what the idea of an omnipotent, omnipotent, all-powerful God can do. And so he's trying to draw the point here that, you know what, you're focusing on something that is really ridiculous. And he comes to this particular point. And this is where people are like, oh, Jesus kind of took care of that question. Because he says, you know what, haven't you read that I am the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob? And then he says that this is the God of the living, not of the dead. So what in the world is he talking about there? He's saying, you guys, why are you focusing all of this energy on trying to minimize and think through these minutiae of laws when it has nothing to do with the dead? Faith, God, everything that we're doing has everything to do with the people here and now. In other words, Jesus is saying, you have got plenty to do right here and right now with the people around you. Stop wasting your time talking about hypotheticals and start putting it into helping all of these people who are suffering. That's what your job is as a priest, really, is to be the sort of the hand of God, to be the hand of compassion and humility to the people around. Now, this sounds like it's a bit of an old story. It sounds like it's a bit locked into a culture that is far removed from who we are, but it's not really. It's not, because we have the exact same thing happening right here, 2,000 years removed. I, as a person who studied for ministry and pastored in churches, had to go through school, and my goodness, there was no end to the amount of conversations and debates that we would have about the most minuscule of ideas in the scriptures, and trying to look at these hyperboles and these metaphors in the scriptures and trying to be the one who figures out exactly what it means. And I think that this is an important message today, especially for us today. Rather than us focusing on trying to figure out whose religious perspective is exact and perfect, instead of doing that, regardless of where our conclusions may fall on the religious spectrum, we all need to be focusing on the suffering around us. That is the whole point of compassion. That's the whole point of our faiths, especially of the Judeo-Christian faith, and I would argue also of the other faiths out there, that the intention is for us to learn how to become better people. The intention is for us to learn how to love others and to become happier and more successful and prosperous, not financially, but just fulfillment in life. This morning I was going back and forth with, I follow an atheist Reddit in on Reddit, one of the rooms or forums. And, I like to just come at it from an angle that is fair to both sides. And I like to listen to the arguments that are kind of coming out of atheism. I appreciate it because it's a different perspective than I hold. And it challenges me to think outside of my own box. And I was, I guess, surprised or shocked a little bit this morning. And maybe it was more about being a little tired of the same argumentation. But a gentleman put up a video that had to do with listing all the reasons why atheism was correct and yada yada. It was the same basic arguments, and setting that whole discussion aside, I thought to myself, this person is so happy and so proud that they've disproved faith, and yet are they focusing and proud and so eager to talk about the people who are suffering around them, rather than us trying to spend all this time? These discussions are important, right? But we have to start talking about where we can really make a difference, where all of our faiths agree that it is good to help those who are suffering, to have compassion, to have mercy. These are all human virtues and things that I feel that we really can hold as common human rules and virtues. So as we go into the weekend this weekend, I hope that you might spend some time, as I will as well, thinking about where we can set aside our own deliberations, our own debates, and instead put some of that time and that energy and that effort into looking at those who are within our circle of affecting, the people that we can actually touch, that we might be able to help. And if it's outside of our circle, to reach outside of our circle and take a look at somebody near us or that we pass by, somebody who's asking for money, somebody who's homeless that we cross by on our way to work, whatever it is, to try to think a little bit more about focusing the time and energy on that conversation of how to have compassion on those individuals. I want to thank you for joining me this morning, and I hope you have a really great weekend of relaxation and maybe of renewal. And if you have family and friends, that you would spend some time with them and have a time of just refreshment. I really appreciate you joining me. I appreciate your comments so much. Please do leave them under the videos, and I'll try to respond to them as soon as I can. And I know other people really appreciate it as well. Also, if you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, there's a little button down in the corner that you can click for that. If you're on Facebook, would love it if you would hit the like button so that we can stay in contact with one another. So until Monday, when we get together again and go through more of this study and looking at our faiths and looking at our common human virtues, I want to make sure that you know that I love you. And I hope you choose to love yourself. It's the only love really in this world that we have any control over. And now I'd ask that you join me as we go about the rest of our day and throughout our weekend, loving our neighbors the same way. Thank you.